Today we want to be covering one's ability to help target the market of people that are working from home. A lot of people with the COVID-19 pandemic are transitioning to working from home. A lot of companies are realizing the value and the cost savings that they are having from transitioning people to work from home. And a lot of landlords, from what we gather and what I have understood, just don't know a lot about home networking or what it means to have an effective home office. Now, a few of the different things that you can take away from today's webinar are a better understanding of what home infrastructure looks like, what it means to have a good home office, how you can present this to a potential tenant that is looking to work from home, and ultimately how you can add value to your rental property by having some very basic stuff done, some stuff that may not even cost you any money out of pocket, but that you can actually add on to your rents as an increased value add, and also be a better service to having tenants that are not only living in your properties, but are making a living in your properties by working from home. So there's a bunch of different things you can take away from here. We've tried to build this slide deck to help you. At the end of it, you can certainly request a copy of everything and we'll send it out to you, so you can kind of use it as a little bit of a cheat sheet. And always, feel free to reach out to myself. Joe has included a little bit of his contact information as well. So without any more on the front end, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Alex Perney. I'm a development specialist here at Advanta IRA. I've been with Advanta since 2012. Before that, I've been involved with computers my whole life. I've really enjoyed building my own computers, doing networking, electronics. I build stuff, whether it's Jeeps or computers or motorcycles. I love tinkering with stuff. So it was great that I met up with Joe, who is a technologist and real estate investor with Sage Properties. He's also been involved in technology professionally since 1983. I pulled a few fun facts. In 1983, the Apple Lisa was released, if anyone is old enough to remember that computer. And also, this was 6 years before Microsoft Word was officially launched as a word processor. The first build was done in 1983 and released in 1989 on Windows 1. So to give you an idea of the depth of knowledge that Joe has with regards to technology and infrastructure is a myth. So I would encourage you, if you have any questions, please ask them. We have a great resource here for you today to get some really great information on this past just what maybe be covered in the slides. Now, before we get started, we always have to make sure that we keep our attorneys happy. Even though we're not going to get too much into the weeds of actual investments, we do need to disclose that our Advanta and our employees do not provide investment advice, nor do we promote or endorse any products. Any information provided here today is for educational purposes only. All parties are encouraged to consult with their attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors before entering into any type of investment. So a basic introduction. So right now, everyone is pretty much well aware, and it should go without saying, that we're seeing a big shift to a large amount of the workforce that can working from home. So a lot of people that were previously doing desk jobs, obviously things like manufacturing and skilled labor are kind of hard to work from home with, but a lot of the large people that are working in office settings are being transitioned to work from home. Now, this brings up a new need for these people in order to work from home. You're not just sitting on your laptop watching Netflix. It brings up the need to have a professional space that is set up correctly with enough infrastructure to support you to be able to actually work from home. So we want to show you that with just a basic understanding of home networks and home office setup, you can help make your rental properties more attractive to these individuals, while at the same time increasing your knowledge of what exactly is information technology, why does this matter, and how can you make more money with this information? Because at the end of the day, if you are trying to rent your property out, if you have an added value, let's say you had a pool at the property, you would increase the rents for having a pool at that property versus a house that doesn't have a pool. Well, this is, obviously not as big of a jump in potential rental price increase, but if you have the knowledge to give a tenant to promote that you have a dedicated workspace with strong internet connection and other features in your property can be a value add that you can help increase the amount of money you put in your pocket at the end of the day. So keep that in mind, that this is kind of a holistic approach to it, an all-encompassing approach, that it's not one thing or another. It's a bunch of different small things that can add up to really being a better value. And also, even if you don't take away and use some of this stuff in your properties, we want to help give you the information of what some of this stuff is, so even personally that you can help benefit from it if you are doing more things from your house, as well as being a landlord that can really help you out. So some of the key components of a home office, and these are what we're going to cover today, are one, internet connections. Everyone knows that you need to have internet brought into the house. You know, you're not working from home in a vacuum and it's not all done just on a telephone. You need to have internet connectivity. And there's varying different levels of that. Everyone's dropped internet on their Wi-Fi in their house, or has maybe a spot that has a dead spot in it. We're going to show you how to alleviate that and have better home coverage Wi-Fi without having to either break the bank or constantly go on hold with your local internet service provider. What it means to have an internal network. So the connection coming into the house is separate from the Wi-Fi signal in your house, and and you need to understand how to improve one or both of those to best suit the needs of a home office or a work from home individual. The environment has a big play on what you may or may not actually need to do with regard to your network. And the environment can be population density in the area that you're living in. It can be the actual type of building that the property that you own is, whether it's block, whether it's frame, whether it's a duplex, triplex, 1 or 2 stories, where you're going to locate this stuff, and what the actual workspace means. Everything from lighting to where the internet connection is actually physically brought into the house. So with internet connection, internal network, environment, and workspace are the 4 real key components that people need to understand when it comes to actually making a property very usable for a work from home individual. Now I'm going to turn it over to Joe. He's going to go over a little bit of the key components of what it means bringing into the front door of your property. Joe, I don't believe I gave you mouse control, so one moment. Let me just do that so you can advance the slides. All right, just make sure that you can move everything around.
Okay, let's try this out here. All right, that's good.
Okay, great. Let me just. There we go.
Are we all set? Okay. Hi all. Do appreciate you coming here, and as Alex said, I've been kicking around the technology arena for a lot of years, and a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about, I've had a chance to work with and use myself. Some of it is newer, and we're all going to learn that together. But the key is that we want to start with how you bring in and set up that that network. And the first part of that first step, is the internet connection. And I want to give you enough information so you have an idea of the technologies for that piece that comes to your front door. We'll talk a little bit about it and give you some things that you can go back and ask your provider so that you get an idea as to what you're getting and what is applicable to you. So having said that, the key technologies that we see in internet today, and again, that internet is that piece that comes to your front door and then goes off into all the connections that form the internet. The ones that we see most pervasively today are the fiber connection, which is here at the top of the listing. Now, fiber connection is actually an optical fiber, and that's literally a piece of glass that comes to your house and connects you to the internet. Now, this is where you get some pretty fantastic speeds. And we're starting maybe in reverse order, because I would say that this is your best bet as a internet connection. So you get something typically in the range of 50 to 1,000 megabits per second. Okay, so what the heck is a megabits per second? Think of it as how fast your car can drive down the highway. So for instance, miles per hour. If your car can go 60 miles per hour, okay, but if it can go 100 miles per hour, it's going a lot faster and can do a lot more work quickly. So fiber gives us that that kind of very fast connection. And it's really not that much more expensive. However, it's not available in all markets. So availability is a bit of a challenge, but if you can find fiber and bring it to your front door, that really is your best cost for performance value. Next in that line, and this is the one that's probably the most available throughout, it's the cable, the very common coaxial cable you see that comes into your property. For years has supplied TV and services there. Different technology. Now that works at speeds between 25 to 200 megabits per second. And as I said, these cost about the same. I think you can plan between $50, $70, depending on your market, as to what those would cost. But it's very available, and most locations you can get cable. A third one, DSL, which stands for digital subscriber line. Again, a different technology. This is more of a, well, it is a telephone type technology. So this is going over your telephone. This typically will give you 5 to 45 megabits per second. Probably was the absolute best solution years ago, but it's getting a little bit dated. Most people aren't bringing telephone into their homes. So it's a good option if you don't have fiber or cable. Okay. The fourth one there, the 5G, is a wireless technology. You're probably hearing some of this talked about now in the media. That could be extremely fast and very affordable, but it's new. And so we're not really sure how that's all going to play out yet. Plus the infrastructure is probably a number of years before it gets rolled out, but that's one of those forward-looking things. Nice thing about the wireless is you don't have to have something connected to your house. It would use the wireless technique or technologies. The last one I have on the list is other, and I just want to touch on this so that if you don't have access to fiber or cable or DSL, you could still use 4G LTE, which again is a wireless technology. It's a line of sight, relatively fast, not a bad choice. But if I can get fiber or cable, that's the route I'm going to go. Another is satellite. So you could connect to satellites. However, there's some drawbacks to that. One is that they tend to be slow, and again, a little bit more expensive. And the last one is the dial-up, which is, for those of you who've been around for a while, understand the old AOL where you dial up and you share a phone line. If that's your only choice, it's your only choice, but it's slow. And so today it really doesn't work, especially for some of the larger files.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to quickly interject, the great thing about what he's putting up here with regards to the different options for this is that you as a landlord, and I see someone has their hand raised, please type into the chat box if you have a question. We'll certainly answer it. So if you did, just click raise your hand, just type your question into the chat box, we'll get there. But the nice thing about this is that typically you're not going to change anything. You as the landlord aren't going to be paying for their internet and cable. And if you are, good on you. That may not necessarily be something that you want to do, but there's typically either no cost or very minimal cost to have the company bring the service to your door, because then in turn, once they bring it to your door, they get paid. So if you have fiber in your area, you call around, you figure out you have fiber connection, and they bring it up to your house, it might only be $100-200, a fairly minimal cost to have that brought up to your house, but you may be able to charge and say, hey, we have a fiber connected house, and then just tack on an additional $50 or $25 a month in rent, and then you recoup your cost for doing that in the first quarter of the year. But you may attract a much better and long-term tenant by saying, hey, I have a fiber connection at this house. So that's a good point that I'd like to bring up to these, is that if you can offer this and try to get the best service to your location, you may be able to add some money onto your rents that you charge by having a great option available to your tenant.
So Alex, before we jump forward, I just want to touch on a little bit more of the technology, just to give everybody a feel for what these numbers mean.
Absolutely.
When we're talking 50 to 1,000 megabits or gigabit bits per second. Let's put in something that's a little bit more tangible. A 5 gigabyte movie, a high definition movie. How long would that take to download to get into your house using each of these different technologies? Well, if you're plugged into DSL at kind of a typical 5 megabits per second, to download that high definition movie, that's going to take you 2 hours. So you're going to sit there and wait for 2 hours for that to transfer. Okay. Not bad, doable, but it's still 2 hours. Now you move over to cable, and in kind of that range of, say 60 megabits per second, which is kind of common, that same 5 gigabyte movie, that's going to take you approximately 11 minutes to download. Not bad. Now here, where I'm using cable, I get typically 100 megabits per second. So that's going to take me somewhere around 6.7 minutes. So from DSL to cable, we've gone from 2 hours to about 6 minutes. If you move up to fiber, that same movie now will take you 40 seconds. And so I just wanted to give you an idea as to what those speeds mean in real life working with files. The last piece I want to leave you with is that all of these are not created equal because of different types of technology. And the one question you want to take forward with when you're looking at what internet connection to bring in is everybody advertises the fastest speed. So fiber, cable, DSL, you can get up to so many megabits per second. You need to be careful, okay? Fiber is known as a symmetrical delivery, which means the upload and download speeds are the same. DSL falls into that same category, but cable doesn't necessarily. It falls into what's called a asymmetrical, which means your download speeds, are the ones that are typically advertised, are what they're saying you're going to get 100 megabits per second. But your upload speeds are going to be something less. And mine here is 10 megabits. So downloading that 5 gigabyte hard or high definition movie, about 6 minutes to download it. If I wanted to upload it, it's going to take me over an hour. So that's what you want to be careful of when you're looking at the different internet connections coming into your property, and make sure you ask what type of service you're getting. Okay. So with that, Alex, I just can move the slides here forward. Let's see.
Yep.
There we go. Oh, okay. So
there we go.
All right, thank you. So just to give you a little bit of additional technology behind this, when you're connecting the internet to your internal network, there's a couple of pieces that you need, and this is where we transition from that outside connection. And by the way, that outside connection is usually handled by the vendor. So whoever your service provider is, that's usually who'll support that, do whatever you need to have that fixed. As you get into your internal network, some of that starts to shift. But as we look at this, the fiber connection uses what they call an optical network termination. It's a fiber modem. It translates those light signals to a digital signal that can be used with your internal network. The cable connection, you'll hear it referred to as a cable modem. It's really a bridge, and it does the same thing. It takes that signal off the coaxial cable and converts it into something that your internal network can use through the Wi-Fi or across your Ethernet cables. And Ethernet is just that kind of yellow cable you see running around everywhere that plugs into the back of the routers and into your computers. And the last one, the DSL connection, that truly is a modem. And for those of you who want some trivia, modem stands for modulation demodulation. That translates the analog telco signals into digital signals. Again, for the same purpose, to turn it into what the telco systems use into something that can be used internal on your network. And the last major component that you need to get this set up is a router. And typically nowadays, that's a wireless router so that you can have wireless within your internal network. Now, there are a lot of functions that your router can provide. It directs traffic internally. It knows how to reach resources that aren't internally. It can do firewalls. It can do some, and we'll talk about some of this as we move through. It can create different networks within there. So definitely not all routers are created equal. And so when you're looking at that, that's one area that you want to look at to say, what type of services do I want or do I want to provide? But it's also the point where some of this support is going to transition from the provider to now this is your internal network and the support would be up to you. So I think that covers that one, Alex. Let's move forward to the next.
Great. So, okay. So we do have a question before I kind of get into the Wi-Fi. I have a question on from Eugene asks, any info on Google services in the Tampa Bay area? So what she's asking about, or what they are asking about, is, excuse me, Google Fiber is kind of the large benchmark in best internet in the country. As far as I know, they are expanding into Florida. It's just a matter of when we actually get our data hub for all those light signals to go to. They haven't. I actually looked into it for my own home purpose not too long ago, but it's, you know, they're kind of cagey with you know, when stuff gets rolled out. You know, is it coming? Probably yes. When will we get it? Probably sometime. It's hard to say. So that's kind of what I would say to that. And then also to Joe's point on the previous slide, let me just go back one for something. You know, with these, when we go good, better, best, it's not all about speed. It's also what's called bandwidth. So how much you can actually utilize of that network without having degradation for other users. So if you have someone doing a video call, let's say doing a Zoom call, and then you have their spouse or their children also running around on Netflix or playing a video game, that also will play into the better internet connection you can have brought into the house. The more stable it is, and the better ability that that person working from home will be able to use the internet connection in that house. Now, what we're talking about with regard to internal networks, most people arbitrarily just...
Alex, if I may just jump in for a second. I mean, you opened up a really important point. Fiber and DSL, you have most access to that bandwidth, okay? That is a line that comes to your house and is dedicated. Cable is not. It's something that's shared across your neighborhood. So Alex raised a very important point, which is if you're in a high capacity neighborhood, townhome or a condo, and all your neighbors are using cable, you're all sharing that same piece of wire, and that can cause congestion and cause issues outside of your home. And so that is something to be concerned about, and another very important thing to keep in mind. Good point, Alex.
Yeah, and to that point is that that's another marketing aspect you can use when mentioning this to work from home tenants, is that you have high speed and high bandwidth capacity. Because if, you know, with a lot of people working from home, and especially kids being out of school, you may have a lot of users using a lot of bandwidth. You can kind of think of bandwidth as you know, how much water is coming out of the tap at one time. You know, if you're trying to fill up 2 glasses on one stream, you know, it's going to be kind of half as fast on the same amount. You know, you open that tap up, you can fill more quicker. So just keep that in mind. That's another point that you can use to kind of some language that you can use when talking to a tenant to help, you know, justify, one, the rent cost, and the fact that you are knowledgeable in trying to provide them the best platform to work from home in that property. Phil asks, is Elon Musk's new satellite network for internet or just cell phones? As far as I understand, with regard to SpaceX's attempt to bring satellite communication, it is going to be internet. For that, it is going to be internet. It is hard to say when they're going to roll out. Elon Musk is famous for being kind of spotty on when they actually roll stuff out and how fast it comes, but it is coming. I would take that.
His intention is to create a worldwide access to the internet. Right now, I think he's got 4,000 satellites, and I think his target is 60,000 to actually get the sufficient number of satellites up there, and that's a completely different technology than it is what we currently use today for satellite technology. The current satellite technology is is actually geostationary, which means it sits above the Earth at about 22,000 miles above the Earth. That's a long way to go to send a signal. And so it adds a lot of time to how the internet works. SpaceX, Elon Musk's approach to that is to put a lot of satellites in low orbit so you don't get that same delay. That delay is called latency, which is different than congestion, but that's for the geeks.
Yeah, and Bill, I'm going to get into your question here in a minute regarding actual the hardwire for fiber, but that's a good question that you have. So I'll get into that in a moment. But let's keep on the topic real quick. So most people, when they think of internet in the house, you think of Wi-Fi, which is internal network. It is wireless internet. So instead of having, like you did with dial-up to plug a phone line into your computer, or plugging an Ethernet cable into your computer, it is wireless network. It's great. It allows you to move from room to room in your house without having a wire connected to your device that you're getting on the internet. There is a trade-off on strength of internet connection, speed of internet connection, and bandwidth when you do go through that type of device. Between your modem, what actually brings the internet connection into your house, has to go into a router that then in turn broadcasts at a signal that your phone or your device picks up. So it is a wireless broadcast of internet connectivity, and the strength of the connection diminishes the farther away from the access point or your router. What most people think of when they say, oh, my router is here, there's a few different ways that can go, and I'll explain that in a second. But the farther you are away from that, the less signal, less bandwidth, less speed that you have. It's no different than if you're far away from your cell phone tower, or if you're too far away with a walkie-talkie. The same thing holds true when you're trying to have any type of wireless connection over a long period. It does degrade the farther you are from the actual source. People working from home will enjoy strong Wi-Fi connectivity, but most of the time they are going to want a wired connection in the room that they are using as a home office. So that would bring up to another slide, is actually where you have the cable company bring in the cable to your house. And again, most of them will do it for free. If you're using their service, say, hey, I need to have cable brought to the house. And if you talk to the tech that comes out, say, hey, can you put it in this room? Sometimes they may charge you a little bit extra just for running a length of cable on the outside of your house to one bedroom if it's far away. But keep that in mind, that Wi-Fi is not going to be the big selling point with regard to your work from home people, but having some abilities to do that, especially when people like to work on laptops, you might want to work on your couch outside, it is a big benefit. Now, what is an access point? Now, this is a little bit more technical, but it is very important. In the most simple terms, it's where your router is located. Now, again, this is good to have in a central location in the property, because if you can't get it brought into a bedroom, you want to make sure that it's as central as possible to the center of the property, so that way as much coverage gets to the property as possible. Now, you can certainly have the internet provider provide you with a modem Wi-Fi router all in one combo, and that is certainly easy. It is by no means the best choice from the perspective of utilization, network security, and just the ability to have a strong connection. But that is essentially your access point. Now, there are abilities that you can have, especially if you have something like a concrete block home, if you have a very large home, or you have a very spread out property, that you can use to help increase the coverage to that property. And it's by adding additional access points. You can add things like signal extenders, which are simply just a powered source that you can plug into a wall in a room maybe farther away from where the Wi-Fi router is, that can help amplify that signal a little bit. Now, these are a little bit older technology. They do help with some Wi-Fi dead spots, but they aren't necessarily the best option, but they are extremely easy to use, they're cost effective, and if you have, and they work with a wide variety of different routers. So if you don't provide a router to your tenant, range extenders, typically you just log on to a website that's provided with that device and pick up that Wi-Fi signal with its password, and it'll extend the range a good bit. So you can provide these to your renters, say, hey, we have range extenders in the house that you can hook up to. And again, that helps to add value. It helps to add to the actual excuse me, I'm losing the word. It helps justify maybe the additional rent increase that you are charging. Now, the biggest benefit is to have whole home internet access. Now, you can use this as something that you take personally or to your tenants. But again, to have whole home access, everyone's probably familiar with the fact that you have, maybe it's your master bedroom that doesn't have very good internet access. And certainly a range extender can help with that. But what it's doing is simply just taking the signal that it gets from something else and help trying to boost it. It's not really doing much on the internal aspects of the actual internet connection. Now there's new ones that are coming out called mesh extenders. It's a much more premium option. It does take a little bit more in the realm of technical knowledge to hook up correctly, but more Wi-Fi routers are coming out now that have dedicated ones made for them, where essentially it is still an extender, but instead of just boosting a signal, it helps to create an additional seamless network to where you are walking from room to room. You don't even notice that the Wi-Fi changes its actual router it's connecting to, and you have broad internet over a large area. Now, obviously, if you want to package something and put a nice Wi-Fi router in to a property that you have for the tenant to use, and then you also want to provide a mesh or a plug-and-play range extender, those are things that are definitely valuable additions. Personally, here at my house, I use a mesh network, and I have a concrete block workshop behind my house. It's a concrete block house. I live in a densely populated part of Pinellas County, and I have fantastic internet throughout my whole house, even in the alleyway and my driveway. I actually pick it up driving to my house. And all said and done, I think the Wi-Fi router that I have and the other hardware cost me about $180, all said and done. It was certainly well worth it. But even for utilizing as much data as I do, the best thing to have is a wired connection. And I can't stress that enough. Although Wi-Fi is great and it's important to understand, the most stable internet connection you're ever going to get is when you plug directly in to your modem access point, whatever is bringing in that connection. You have a physical connection to your actual internet service provider. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about it connecting to your ISP. That's just the acronym for that. So it kind of brings me full circle in that having the physical line coming into to wherever you want to have that home office. And that's another part, is that kind of identify a room that you think would be a good home office, and a bedroom that is, and have that line brought in there. So for my tower computer, I have a dedicated line hooked up into that. It's called an Ethernet cable. Now, when you look at those, there's going to be a lot of different ones you can look at. And Bill had asked a question about the type of connection to use for what type of service you have. Now, remember, we have the services that you're probably going to be dealing with are going to be either cable internet, DSL, or fiber if you're lucky. And there are different grades of cable to use to hook up to the modems. He asked if what's called Cat5 is sufficient for that. Now, that just refers to the different categories. They all have the same plug-in, so you're talking about an Ethernet connection. To answer your question, Bill, it's not much more money to get what's called Cat6. I would use that over a Cat5 cable, even though they have relatively negligible speed differences, and the price difference really isn't that much. I'd use Cat6. They do have Cat7 out there, but it's
if I may, Alex, jump in on that. That really is. It really depends on what you've got coming into the house. If you don't have gigabit coming into your house, fiber coming into your house, Cat5 is just fine. If you start to get up into those higher speeds, you really do need to go to Cat6.
Yep. It's a great point. Unless you're looking at, having fiber in there, the signal drop really isn't worth the additional cost to do. You're never going to see a benefit from it. Now, just before I advance the slide, there is Cat7 out there, and most people think just kind of like gas. It's 87, 90, 93. It's like good, better, best. Well, it's more expensive. It should be better. The technology that they market around Cat7 is more or less a blatant lie with shielded ends, and you're probably never going to have the hardware to support it. So Cat6, if you have fiber, will be plenty. And again, that's something that you can build in and say, hey, if you're lucky enough to have fiber in an area and you're putting that as a selling point on the rental of your property, say, hey, yeah, I included a few, a 3 meter, a 1 meter length of Cat6 cable for you to, make sure that you can hook up everything and really utilize those speeds very well. And you're probably going to, and Amazon Basics sells this stuff. You can get a Cat6 cable. I think about a 5-pack of 1 meter ones for maybe $12. They're super cheap. So it's just, again, small things that you can do to add value that a work from home person may not understand. And again, these people may be coming into it the same way you are, where they never have really had to use a home office before. They never really have had to look at this. So, you can definitely help. Now, there's components to all of this, again, and I'm trying to make this as easy to digest as possible, but kind of a good, better, best scenario. I mentioned with regard to the setup and location, but components have a big deal to play. And even if you have that super high-speed internet coming in to the house, if you have a choke point, then it's not going to be as good, and your tenants may not enjoy what you've kind of tried to work for to give them a good experience. So typically when you get internet, and most all of you have had this experience, for this, John's a landlord and wants to improve their property for his growing work from home population. What should he buy? Now, it's easy to say just to have Spectrum, Cox Communications, Verizon, whoever you're using, Google. I come in, they'll typically provide you with a Wi-Fi router, modem combo. It's probably all in one. They're not that great. They have connectivity issues. They are typically old and used equipment. So that's what they're going to be provided. It is typically going to be free. They may charge you a rental fee for that, or they might charge the tenant a rental fee for that at about $5 a month or something like that. What I would say to you is that, buy something that would maybe a dedicated modem for the house that you in turn then charge that for. Don't let the cable company make the money off of it. Let you make the money. And it's real easy stuff to put in, and it's not.
So Alex, the only thing I would add to that statement you just made is that when you bring in your equipment, you now support it.
Great point. Yes.
And so depending on what your goal is, that may or may not be something you want to do.
Yeah, and again, and we also want this presentation here, and it's going to be recorded, and you'll have the slide deck. You can give these to people and say, hey, if you want to do this, I'm not a tech person. I can't really support the hardware, but if you want, here's a good resource for you to figure out what might be a good fit for you. But that's a great point, Joe. The second you start actually bringing in hardware past just, some cable, like a few runs of Cat5 cable or something like that, if they have a problem, they're calling you because it's your equipment you're providing. But typically, let's say they get internet, you've brought the good service to the house, but you just they're using the dedicated combo. Definitely not the best way to go. It's definitely better to have a separate modem only that just processes the signal, and then a separate Wi-Fi router. So a separate component that is not directly what you screw the cable component into. That's the better option, to just use that for the whole house. Some good options for that. I personally run a Netgear Nighthawk. There's a bunch of different iterations, but the newest is typically best. They have different price points. Again, for my Wi-Fi router, I believe now currently it is a fantastic router. I think you can get it for like $80. I paid probably double that when it was new. And then any of the Linksys AC models, there's a bunch of those as well. Those are really good routers to use. Those are just ones I've had personal experience with. More expensive is not always better. Just do a little bit of research, read some reviews on it. I would encourage you to get something that is as new as possible. Something that has come out within the past year is probably going to be good for you to either provide or to tell the tenant to provide them as well. And then the absolute best for Wi-Fi networking in a house is to have that dedicated modem and router, and then have range extenders or mesh nodes, like I mentioned, a little bit more complicated one to set up. That is going to give your property whole coverage, whether you're outside on the patio enjoying, maybe not right now with the heat in Florida, but in the fall time enjoying the outdoors, every single room have no Wi-Fi dead spots, that is the best option. It's the most expensive, the most technologically involved one to get, but that is, the kind of 3 levels of this. Can you have a home office with a modem Wi-Fi combo? Yeah, if you have the home office and you have that modem Wi-Fi combo in that room, so long as you can plug into it, absolutely, they can use that and they'll probably have no problem, but they might have Wi-Fi issues. Now, when it comes to location and setup, it's a good segue. You want to have the cable drop brought in as centrally located to the house as possible, especially if you want to use Wi-Fi only. Now, if you want to have a dedicated home office, make sure that they bring that into that room that they're going to have the office in, because that way they'll have the ability just to plug in right directly to their laptop or something, have good, strong internet connection that's not going to drop intermittently. Now, if you want to have the best, a better option, have the Wi-Fi router in the center of the property and then run an Ethernet cable from that modem over to the router. It's pretty easy. I just fished the cable from my home office into my living room, plugged it in, and now my router covers my entire house. And then again, the best option is to have extenders to fully cover the property with Wi-Fi. And again, this might not be something that you necessarily want to provide to your tenants, because you do have to then in turn support these kind of things. You can certainly employ services, tech services that can be on call for this, but that'd be an additional expense. But at minimum, making sure that you have the internet brought into the house in the best location and kind of letting them build on that. Again, utilizing this as a kind of template for what you can tell them, say, hey, I have some experience, here's what you can do to improve that, can definitely help you to increase your profits on the property. And just to, again, expand, I think this is a good visual representation of where stuff can be located. Because when you're thinking about your properties, you don't necessarily think, you would think that you need to have a plug in every room. Obviously, you don't want to have one room that has no lamp or no light in it. But there are some rooms in your house where you really don't need to worry about the tech or the actual connections of it for any regard, whether it's your personal house or your rental house. There's some places that if a tenant asks for it, if you see something online, it's just white noise. You don't really need to look at it. So the home office is really going to be the most important. You want to make sure that you have whatever internet that is, whether it's the DSL connection, whether it's the cable connection, whether it's the fiber optic connection to the house. If you can get it brought in to that room, that is going to be your best bet. It'll allow your tenant to directly plug in, strongest connection. Again, I can't really emphasize that enough, and it's the easiest. So that way you don't have to wire something, or you don't have to worry about them having issues with Wi-Fi. Definitely the best to have it brought in. Living rooms, yeah.
I'm sorry, I know we're running close on time, but I just wanted to really, during the slide, point out that considering we're talking to folks that are doing investing, if you're remodeling, putting some of that cable drops in during that remodel is not an expensive proposition. And so you can really do a lot of what Alex is talking about very inexpensively by adding that cabling during your remodel. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's not something, again, you have to do. I mean, any contractor in this day and age has more than likely run some internet terminations, even putting it directly into a wall jack like you might see in a big office. So if you're doing a remodel, just ask, and I'm sure that almost any of them are capable enough to get that done for you. The living room is one to look at. If you can have an internet drop, so an ability to hook up the modem that's in the office to the living room and have that router in there. Again, you don't have to provide it, but if you just have the connection for it, it can be a great benefit. Say, hey, we have the modem located in the office. There's a internet jack in the living room for you to plug in your router. We'll give you the best coverage over the whole house. It's a great place to put it if you can. You really don't need to worry about guest bathroom or guest bedrooms or kitchens. Unless they're like, for some reason, dead middle in the center of the house. Again, don't really need to worry about those at all. The master bedroom, again, if you're trying to make this most attractive and you want to plug in a range extender back there, I personally have one back there because my house is kind of oddly shaped. It's a block house. It can definitely help. But if you see things about needing to put stuff in your kitchen or your guest bedrooms or anything like that, again, pretty much white noise. the main focus of what you want to do to make things attractive is have that robust connection in the home office. And then a big added bonus is having the ability to put the Wi-Fi router centrally located, typically in the living room.
You know, as we look at things to consider inside that internal network, there are a number of things that we've already touched on, but I want to just quickly review a few things to keep in mind. When you're setting up your network, looking at a private network and a guest network, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. You also might want to consider firewalls, and that's where you start getting into your security and setting up what type of traffic you want to allow in. And you also want to consider just keeping your antivirus up to date, and also VPNs. And let's move to the next slide. I think I still have control, right? Oh, there we go. All right, so when we talk in terms of why would a private and a guest network be important? So we've been talking about, and I want to point out before I forget, everything we're talking about here is commercially available. We're not talking about anything that you're going to have to go out and buy special equipment that you might find in a data center. Everything that we're presenting and talking about here is commercially available. But setting up a private network, which would be the one that you would work on typically, or that whoever's in the house would typically work on. You may also want to set up a second network. Now that doesn't mean buying additional equipment. That just means dividing that service into two different distinct internal networks. Advantage? Well, obviously for your private, you keep all that secure. You don't let other people have access to your resources. And by allowing a guest network, you can keep that a little bit more open. So say you're running an Airbnb out of your house. Your Airbnb people could jump onto your guest network. Friends come over. Instead of giving them the password to your private network, they can jump on the guest network. So it's just a way to help keep your network a little more secure. And that's really kind of the theme of what we're talking about here is just protecting that network. And so that firewalls and antivirus, they all kind of fit in that same. For those of you who know what a firewall is, and those that don't, it's really just a way to control the traffic that goes in and out of your network. And so by limiting what goes in and out, you have less of a chance of people abusing your system or breaking in and getting access to your data. VPNs also work in that same vein, and a VPN is a virtual private network. And what that really does is give you some privacy when you're out going across the internet. It really forms an encrypted tunnel from your desk to whatever you're reaching out to, as well as masking where you're coming from. And the reason that is important is we see these pop-up ads all over the place. It helps get rid of some of that. And again, just gives you privacy, adds a nice, strong level of encryption that protects the data going out over the internet. So these are all things that consider when you're looking at your network. And a lot of these are either built into your router, okay? So again, not all routers are created equal, or you can get them as software. So in the case of like VPN, I use Norton antivirus. As part of that subscription, I get a VPN. And so some of the stuff is very available, very easy to use.
Yeah, and just to tack onto that, with regard to the networks, you brought up a great point, Joe, especially people that have Airbnbs. And if it's your personal property you live in and you Airbnb a portion of it, it is very easy to set up a different network. Most of these routers now will have some type of website. For example, the one I use, the Netgear Nighthawk. I have an app on my phone. It's super easy to use. It's just a basic login and it's point and click. It'll let you set up a different network with a different name and password. It is about as simple as it gets. So you don't have to be someone like Joe who's been doing this literally longer than I've been alive to do this stuff. Some of this stuff is extremely easy, and the companies that make this stuff have understood this and make it very user friendly to set up another network. So don't let this be something that scares you. It is very easy to set up multiple networks, and especially in the Airbnb space, like you said, Joe, can be a very important and very beneficial thing to have as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind though, this is again the point that all routers are not created equal. If you get a router, and I have one from from the carrier out here, Spectrum, it doesn't give me that nice, easy way to do a guest private network. I can do it, but I have to configure it. So if that's something you want, make sure you're asking those questions. Can I do this and how do I do it? So that you do get the proper equipment that does make it easy. Okay. Now, some of the other areas that we want to talk about, and this, we've called this useful and optional, and I'll tell you, I think it's good to have. So we talk about conditioned power. So now we've got the signal coming in, we've got everything set up. What we want to do is pay attention to how we power everything. In Florida, lightning, we get lots of surges. That's hard on equipment. You might consider conditioning that power, and by that I mean really protecting it against surges. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can buy surge protectors and plug them into your outlets. It's done. Do yourself a favor, don't buy the cheap ones. Get something that's a halfway decent surge protector. Some utilities are also offering that they'll put surge protection on your entire house. They'll do it at the meter to help protect against lightning strikes. You may want to consider that as a value add to your tenants and for your property. UPSs are standalone interruptible power supplies. Well, I'll tell you, just the other day I had mine blink out for just a couple of seconds. The whole system goes down, and then you got to restart it. May or may not have lost data, but what you're doing is you're really damaging your system, and you can corrupt your files. So having a UPS system, uninterrupted power supply, is a nice benefit. And again, they range. You can do ones where you just plug it in next to your computer, or you can do UPSs on circuits. And that kind of brings us to that next one, which is if you're doing a remodel, you might consider putting in a dedicated circuit. Put a dedicated circuit into that office. And the reason for that is, one, you can put UPS on just that dedicated circuit so that, again, value add, you've got something that's protected. But believe it or not, if somebody plugs a vacuum cleaner into the same circuit you've got your computer on, it can cause problems, right? So having a dedicated circuit, kind of a nice thing. And if you're doing a remodel, it doesn't add that much to the remodel. And you can even get a little bit fancy and put some of the USB charging ports on some of those outlets, so that really just adds some value and makes that room you're promoting as an office even more desirable.
Yeah, and just to kind of tag on to that, UPS, typically people call them battery backups. Is kind of the colloquial term for them. And to give you an idea, these are cheap. And again, you can, I think I saw a 2-pack at Costco that was battery backup and surge protection for like, I don't know, it was like $70. Buy one, throw it in your tenant, buy the other one, and use it yourself. And like that, they are very cheap, but they're very, very good to have. You're especially like right now, if my power blipped on my computer, I would lose the recording that I have right now. It's kind of the nature of the beast, but it's just something good to know. They can be very cheap. They can be a little bit more, but again, these are all good value adds. So you can tell your tenant, say, hey, we got conditioned power with full house surge protection. And that kind of stuff goes right onto the electric bill that they're already paying for. So it might be a small charge, but again, you're not having to pay for this. You don't have to support it. It goes, support goes to TECO, Florida Power and Electric, Duke, whoever it is. So, it's definitely some good stuff that you can put in that you don't have to worry too much about.
Right. If anybody has questions, I mean, UPSs are, the more time you want your system up and running, the more expensive they're going to be. So it just depends on what you want to accomplish. But at the very minimum, you should protect your system from surges and power outages and drops and things like that.
Yeah.
All right, so kind of the last section, and I think we're getting real close to our time here, is just some things to consider in your office. Not necessarily technology, but just to consider, take a look around. Lighting. We've all seen it in online meetings where somebody has a really bright window behind them. You can't see them, okay? So just pay attention to where your lighting is. You don't have to go out and buy the ring lighting and all that fancy stuff. Just position yourself so that people can see who they're talking to. take a look at your camera and your microphone. A lot of times when they're built into a laptop, it's a little tough to hear. It's a little tough to see. And you can get externals that plug in. They're very available. They're not very expensive. And it makes a world of difference. Background, boy, I'll tell you, I've seen some funny things in the backgrounds of meetings. So pay attention to what's behind you, okay? Turn around, take a look, and warn people in your house when you're on a meeting, because sometimes people not realize that and come walking through your area. Can be embarrassing. And then get a quiet area. It really is, it's distracting to hear dogs barking, and I know some folks say, well, that makes it human, but you know what? When you're conducting business or trying to do something, a quiet area is nice. So just some things to consider when you're creating that space and looking at what works as an office location.
Yeah, and that also brings up the point of that, when you're looking, if you're trying to make this attractive to a work from home crowd, if you're looking at that guest bedroom, even as simple as that, say, hey, I want the cable brought into that bedroom. Well, if it's brought onto the wall that has a bunch of windows behind it, maybe say, hey, can you put it on the other wall? So that way, when everyone sets everything up, then, they don't have a bunch of windows behind them or something like that. If they're already bringing it into that room or you're doing a remodel, just keep that in mind. And also things like blackout curtains, they're cheap, but they can help make a world of difference. If those are things that you're replacing and updating, those can be a big difference to people that work from home. And things that you can say, hey, we have a properly positioned internet connection with blackout curtains and in one of the guest bedrooms if you want to make it a home office. Did it cost you anything really? Hardly anything. Blackout curtains, maybe $15. The internet company is not going to really charge you no matter where they pull it into the wall. But it creates value and it creates a differentiating factor for your rental property that can be valuable that you can potentially charge extra for.
All right. I think that brings us, the troubleshooting, my favorite part. I just wanted to have a section here. This is what I've done a lot throughout my career. So I just want to touch on these briefly and give you some ideas. Things you might hear is congestion. So we talked a little bit about it as we went through here. That's just too many demands on the internet, internally or externally. And remember, when we talk externally, if you're on cable, that doesn't necessarily just mean the immediate surrounding area. That's your entire neighborhood. Okay, so folks that are out there doing their streaming may be affecting you. So congestion, you're going to see slowdowns, you're going to see intermittent access, you're going to see that little spinning thing that always comes on when you're trying to watch a movie. Those types of things can be caused by congestion. A little bit trickier, okay, when you start to get into wireless, you start getting into the signal quality. And Alex touched on that, so we're not going to spend a lot of time, but that's just location and distance. The further away you get, you may be affecting the quality of your signal, and you may have to adjust that. Behind that, and similar though, is channel contention. And we talked about it earlier. You've checked it, you don't have a whole lot of folks around you, but every now and again, it just drops out and it doesn't want to stay connected. It could be that in high density locations where everybody's using the same carrier, you're all fighting for the same channel on your router. Now, knowing what the channel is and how to fix it, it's probably just more important to talk to the vendor and say, hey, can you put me on a different channel? But behind the scenes, we're all using the same frequency, but we can be on different channels. And so by default, they all get installed on about the same channel. And if you got a lot of folks nearby, you could be fighting for that same channel. And I've seen this happen over at my townhouse where I had a lot of dropouts. And as soon as I put it on a different channel, took care of it. Okay, so just an area to be concerned about or to know about. And then the last piece is your residential services versus business services. So the majority of the stuff we're talking about is residential service. If you need a higher quality service, you may need to go up and spend additional money for a business service. They'll typically give you more guarantees about availability, uptime, things like that. Where with residential service, it's best effort. there's no guarantees. It can go down in the middle of the day, and there's not a lot you can do about that. So tools, these are just a couple of quick ones that I'll use. Speedtest.net. If you just want to find out what kind of connection you have, go there. Just do speedtest.net. It'll find out where you're at, and you hit go, and it'll tell you what kind of internet speed you've actually got. And then to measure that signal quality and contention, and maybe look at those channels and find out, do I have a strong signal? Do I have a lot of folks using the same channel? What channels would be good for me to change to? There's a number of different analyzers that you can put on your smartphone. I use Wi-Fi analyzer. It's free, at least for the version I'm using. You can get a pro version, but it's enough to tell me how strong is my signal, and do I have channels that might be a better choice that I can go in and reconfigure my wireless to talk on. And so those are just some tools that I've used to help troubleshoot some of the problems that you get in a home office. And having said that, I think that, Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. I mean, again, keep in mind that when you are troubleshooting, if you are bringing in the equipment, you are going to need to be responsible for some of that troubleshooting. So if you just want to kind of give them, obviously we will be happy to send you this slide deck. If you just want to kind of give them this as a guide, but anytime you start providing hardware, they're going to call you for troubleshooting. So if you feel comfortable doing it in your own home and you don't mind and you'd like to, add that service, by all means. But keep in mind that all this stuff is super easy to use as just a user interface. When you start trying to provide service, that's when you really need to have a little bit more of a technical background to be able to effectively troubleshoot. If you have any other questions, I put this up here. This will be cataloged on our YouTube channel, so it'll probably go up later today or tomorrow. If you'd like the slide deck, please feel free to email me and I'll send you a PDF of it. We have, constant events and different things that we like to bring out to you to help help you with investing and making things as easy as possible for you and bringing you new content as well. So if you want to contact me, my contact information is up here. If you want to contact Joe, his preferred contact information is right there. If there are any questions, feel free to chime in to the chat box. I'll probably stick around here. We have about 40 people still signed on. Once it gets down to about 15 or so, we'll end this up for the recording. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in now. We're happy to address them. But I want to personally thank Joe very much. It's been a pleasure getting to work with you and getting to know you better over the past weeks of putting this together. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to help people understand technology and what it means for working from home and for them personally as well today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone. I will be starting to do some more blogging and putting information out about technology as it relates to real estate and investing. And I wouldn't be surprised if Alex and I do a couple more of these on different technologies that may be useful in the future. So stay tuned.
Yeah, great. Okay, looks like we got a question. Yeah, sure. We have an individual that has COVID safety training. Let's see. Whoever's interested in COVID safety training can contact me, Heather Olson at 1031great@gmail.com. So it looks like someone's doing some COVID-19 safety training. I was over from my colleague Larissa Green had sent that over. So we're certainly happy to do that. 1031great@gmail if you're interested in some COVID-19 safety training. Should be some good content. I was trying to think of anything else just while we have people bouncing off. I wanted to just kind of tap on as an addendum to this. This kind of stuff is great to learn because even if it doesn't necessarily apply to you, this is the direction the world is heading, for better or for worse. It is technology based. So having a basic understanding of this stuff, not only for your tenants and for your properties and investing can help you in many different aspects of life. So having at least the basic understanding is definitely good for that.
I think that's an important point. Whether you use it for your tenants or yourself, just knowing what the technologies are and being able to have some questions to ask will make you a more informed consumer. And so you can get really what you need to support your business, your home, whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to see. Oh, and tonight, if you have any other questions, I will be attending the Polk County RIA monthly meeting. If you have any follow-ups but have to leave or want to chat with me, I'll be on that meeting again tonight. That's actually where Joe and I met each other, was through that meeting. So if you have any questions, you're a member of Polk County RIA, PCRIA, PCREIA.com. If you would like to come over and join that meeting. Tonight I will be over there. So if any other questions, can't remember who the speaker is tonight, but yeah, I'd love to have you. It's a great group of people over there in Polk County.
That's tonight, Alex?
Excuse me? Yeah, I believe that today's today's the second Thursday of the month. Never mind, I misspoke. It is not tonight.
But we'll have another meeting next week on Thursday.
Yes, next week I'll be there. PCREIA.com. I don't really, even though we got plenty of people still signed on, I don't really see too much in the way of questions. So I'll go ahead and stop up the recording now so we can let Joe get back to his day and let all of y'all get back to what you're doing. So again, thank you, Joe, very much for being on with us. I really appreciate the time out of your day, and the content was fantastic. To everyone else, please stay safe. Hopefully this information was good. If you would like a copy of the slide deck, please feel free to email me at aperney@advantaira.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Joe or myself. We would be more than happy to help you. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Alex.